Hi folks, today we're looking at another new handheld emulation device, the POWKIDDY RGB30. I have one of their previous models, the RGB10 Max 2, and still use that a lot, but this one is quite different. This was sent over by Mechdiy, and there's a link to their website below if you want to order yourself one. I'm under no obligation to review this favourably, and any opinions expressed are my honest thoughts. There are two reasons why the RGB30 has now entered the regular rotation in my house, and I'll explain those reasons in due course. The box the RGB30 comes in is, as with their previous models, very plain. The device inside is well packaged though. Inside is just the device itself, a quick start sheet and a USB-C charging cable. The RGB30 is much smaller than the Max 2, having a screen more similar in size to the Miyoo Minis. However, what really sets this device apart is its unusual 1:1 aspect ratio. This screen is perfectly square. On the front you have a D-pad and 4 face buttons, start and select buttons, and 2 analog sticks. The sticks are similar to those on the RGB10 Max 2, mimicking the Nintendo Switch's sticks, and are really good. They are also buttons, of course, which can be pressed. The face buttons are nothing to write home about, but work just fine. The weak link here is certainly the D-pad, which does feel a bit stiff and clunky. To be honest, it's fine for most uses. I've definitely seen a lot worse, but those wanting to play stuff like Versus Fighters may be left wanting. Also on the front you have 2 speakers underneath the 2 analog sticks, nestled beside some contoured grip, which is actually very useful and also complements the device's minimalistic design nicely. This non-slip texture is also on the back. Next to the face buttons there's a power LED indicator as well. The underside of the RGB30 has a USB-C connection for external peripherals and so on, and USB-C charging port, a 3.5mm headphone jack, and 2 SD card slots. Interestingly, the device comes with a 16GB SD for the OS, and the other main SD card, which in this case was 64GB, houses all your ROMs. This is entirely optional. You can opt to have everything on one SD. Each SD card slot supports cards up to 256GB in size. On top you have 4 shoulder buttons, volume controls, an HDMI out port, and reset and power buttons. These shoulder buttons are really that, buttons, so expect more Super Nintendo than Nintendo Switch in terms of give and springiness. These are very shallow indeed, even more shallow than the face buttons, so any games requiring any form of trigger sensitivity are out of the question. For arcade, 16-bit and earlier stuff they're fine, but bear in mind things do get tricky when you start getting into PlayStation N64 and beyond. The device is very light, weighing 205 grams. Despite its lightweight and plastic housing, it somehow doesn't feel cheap, and I actually really like the design and feel of it in the hand. Now I'm going to do something I don't normally do here, which is show you the device without any intervention or fiddling from me. What I mean is I haven't changed the software or added any of my own ROMs. I want you to see exactly what you'll get when you order one of these. I know a lot of people don't want the hassle of messing about with these things, so this is the SD card exactly as it came. Except I have changed out the SD card. I always recommend doing this as the cards that come with these devices can fail, and it's cheap to buy a decent replacement. I immediately copied to a good quality 128GB SD before I even turned it on, but no changes to the data, it was a straight copy. On Mechdiy's website there are several options for the colour of the device and the size of the SD card when ordering. You can get either a 64, 128 or 256GB SD card for the ROMs. As I've said, I've swapped my 64GB one for a 128GB card, which will give me some room to add plenty of my own games. Prices start at $90 and I believe there are further discounts available currently. Booting up the device takes about 15 seconds as it loads the operating system GelOS or Gelos. The menu style here is the default setting and looks pretty good. You have artwork for each system and we have all the usual suspects here, 8 and 16-bit stuff, arcade, PlayStation, N64, Dreamcast and loads of handheld stuff. The square screen is a 720p IPS screen and looks absolutely stunning. The device has an ARM quad-core 1.8 GHz processor with 1GB of DDR4 RAM. So on paper, this is actually more capable than both the RGB10 Max II and the Miyoo Mini Plus. If you want to add your own ROMs, it's very simple, just pop your ROMs onto the SD card in the relevant folders. There's also a scraper if you connect to Wi-Fi, which will search online for box art for any games you've added to the SD. The supplied SD I received contained just under 11,000 games in total, over 2,000 being arcade games. There are separate sections for Mega Drive and Genesis, so I'd imagine there's an overlap of several hundred games there, but still at least 10,000 games here to keep you busy. Most of the earlier systems like Mega Drive, NES, Super Nintendo, Game Boy Advance and so on will have full libraries, barring a few games that are always absent from these devices. For example, usually first-party Nintendo games will be missing, like the Super Mario series. The SD card also has a ton of unused folders for other systems like Amiga, Virtual Boy, etc, so you can set these up and add them to the menu if desired. The systems with the fewest games are the more recent ones. Original PlayStation only has 36 games, 14 for PSP, Nintendo DS has 9, and there are a mere 5 Dreamcast games. To give you an idea, PSP games on the card are typically between 200 meg and 1.5 gigabytes. PlayStation games are usually under 500 meg, Dreamcast games under a gig. Although the same era as PlayStation, the N64's cartridge-based ROMs are far smaller, capping out at about 32 megabytes, which is why you have 175 N64 games versus the PlayStation's 36. If you order different sized SD cards with these handhelds, you usually just get more games for these systems that have the larger file sizes, i.e. more PlayStation, Dreamcast and PSP and so on. This is why I ordered a 128 gig card. The 64 gig one I received with the console is almost full, so if I want to add my own games I need a bigger one. So bear that in mind, add a full library of something like Mega Drive and it'll only be about a gigabyte of data in total. But load your SD with Dreamcast games, well, they'll take up almost that much space each. The RGB30 works much like the Max II and many of these handhelds really, so I won't go fully down the rabbit hole of explaining all the features. If you're into these things, I'm sure you know what they can do by now. Each system has myriad options, most of which you can happily ignore, but some you will want to tweak to your liking. Good examples are the chosen emulator for each system, the bezels used, and you can of course download these online or create your own, and the screen filters and shaders like this CRT shader, which actually looks stronger on camera than it is in person. But this stuff is all customizable in the settings. The sheer number of different CRT shaders was a bit overwhelming actually. The main menu plays random music which you can change or turn off, including tracks from series like Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Donkey Kong Country and Sonic Adventure. Pressing start on the main menu gives you access to a wealth of settings, including UI settings like brightness, contrast and other appearance tweaks. You can also set the theme for your main menu here, and there are several available. Some of these look superb, so you have some good choices of how you want your main menu to look. Once you drill down into a system, you'll see the list of games. Again, this list can be changed depending on how you'd rather it display, but I like the default format here. Press select for an options menu where you can filter the list, press Y to search, or press X for a menu that lets you view save states and add a game to favourites. Once added here, that game will appear under favourites on the main menu, making all your favourite games easily accessible. This thing will play anything 16-bit or earlier very well indeed. Bear in mind the aspect ratio is square, so 4:3 games like Super Nintendo, PC Engine or Mega Drive will have a bezel as the play area won't fill the entire screen. But this is just fine, same goes for most arcade games. When in an arcade game, press select to add credits. When you want to exit a game for any system, just press select and start together, then again, and it will exit to the main menu. PlayStation and Dreamcast games work surprisingly well. I was especially impressed with how well Dreamcast games run on this with no stuttering or lag. Both have the 4:3 aspect ratio, so again the screen is cropped slightly with a bezel. Same with N64, it actually plays rather well, but this is where those poor shoulder buttons will really cause problems. Fine for stuff like Diddy Kong Racing, but they are absolutely awful triggers for shooters like GoldenEye. I fibbed slightly when I said that I hadn't amended the contents of the SD card yet. Well, that's mostly true, but I did add a couple of Sega Saturn games to try out, as the SD didn't come with any Saturn games at all. Seems to work just fine, and it was as straightforward as copying them to the Saturn folder on the SD. Simply by adding games, the OS automatically added a Saturn option to the main menu. Where the screen will run into issues is with widescreen content like PSP. This is really not suited to play these games, as it has to squash the screen down to fit. I mean, they are actually perfectly playable, but it's not ideal visually. Where that screen becomes a strength is with the older handheld systems. The screen, as I mentioned, has a 1:1 aspect ratio. This makes it absolutely perfect for handheld games like the original Game Boy, but especially for the Sega Game Gear and Neo Geo Pocket Color. The Neo Geo Pocket has a square aspect ratio, so these games completely fill the screen and look amazing. Game Gear looks wonderful too, almost filling the screen, having just a small bezel that you can see here. So honestly, this alone is a reason to get one of these. This is the first of the two reasons I mentioned at the start of the video why this is already getting a lot of use from me. If you wanted to get this for Neo Geo Pocket games alone, it's probably worth the asking price, especially considering how much a Neo Geo Pocket console with modded screen will set you back, even before you factor in the games. Just a joy to use for these handheld games. It's also surprisingly good for vertical arcade shooters. You can see on Dodonpachi here, it looks superb on this screen with a small bezel at each side. Often these handheld emulation devices will struggle to allow these vertical shooters to be played without rotating the screen Tate style, which of course makes using the controls very awkward. Some of my favourite arcade games have the vertical orientation, so this is a real bonus for me. In theory, this should mean that Nintendo DS games are also great on the RGB30. Well, they do look pretty good, as the screen can display both screens quite well, as it would a vertical arcade game. But unfortunately, there's no touchscreen, so any touchscreen games are out of the question. What's funny is one of the included games is this Lego Harry Potter, which you can only play for a few seconds before a prompt requires that the touchscreen be activated so you can't progress. There are only 9 DS games on here. It would have been sensible to include those which didn't require the use of the touch interface, unless I'm completely missing something and there's a way around it. Another wonderful use of the screen is with Pico 8 games. Pico 8 is what they refer to as a fantasy console, meaning it's a non-existent virtual console that people can develop simple games for. Celeste started out as a Pico 8 game, which you can see here. I have again added a few Pico 8 games myself, as there weren't any installed, despite Pico 8 displaying on the main menu. This was really easy to do and I've been loving them. The screen's aspect ratio is a perfect fit for these games. I'm new to Pico 8, so I just googled top Pico 8 games and have been trying a few of the recommendations. They're very charming and have that 8-bit simplicity to them, reminiscent of original Game Boy games. The console's 4100 mAh battery lasts for up to 8 hours and can fully charge in 2. You'll struggle to get the full 8 hours of usage out of this unless you stick to particularly strain-free use like low brightness. More demanding systems like Dreamcast will give you much less battery life than say NES. The battery indicator top right seems to be somewhat inaccurate too, because it's hit 0% for me a couple of times and not shut down. The LED indicator will turn red when the battery is getting low. From what I've read, installing a different operating system like ArcOS can extend the battery life, so that's something to bear in mind, but it's still early days for me with this device. The speakers on the front are actually pretty decent for a handheld like this. Although I usually play with headphones or with the volume turned off, the option is there for you to enjoy a game's music at a louder volume than you'd likely need to. The The second reason I'm now completely sold on this system is the HDMI out. Just connect this port on the top of the handheld to an HDMI cable, hook it up to your monitor or TV and you're away. Simple as that. Here's footage I recorded into my Elgato. It looks great on a big screen, and what's wonderful is that it automatically adjusts the aspect ratio to suit your output screen. Play PSP games in this way and they'll fill the screen, so this is actually fine for widescreen games, unlike the RGB30's native display. 4x3 games like Mechdiy will display weirdly via HDMI. It still uses the bezel and it overlaps the play area. You just have to go into the game settings and set the aspect ratio to full, then you get a full 4:3 screen, and it too looks great. While plugged in via HDMI, you can use the RGB30 as a controller, which works surprisingly well, or connect any Bluetooth controller to the device and use that. And don't forget that USB-C port on the bottom for connecting any external peripherals like a keyboard or controller, and this is separate to the USB-C charging port, so you can charge at the same time. This is a bit of a game changer for those who travel a lot and, for example, stay in hotels. Not only can you play this on the train or plane, but take an HDMI cable and a controller and you've got a versatile emulation system that you can play on any screen. Pretty cool. It essentially makes this a very small portable emulation computer. So despite the amazing one-to-one screen being the RGB30's most unique selling point, its difficulty playing widescreen games is also a bit of a downfall. But this HDMI out feature almost entirely makes up for that because it adapts to the aspect ratio of your screen. So there we go, that's really the takeaway from this video. Is this emulation device for you? Well, that depends. If you want to play handheld games like Game Gear and Neo Geo Pocket, then this screen is probably the best out there. If you want to be able to connect to an external screen via HDMI, then this has you covered. But the screen is quite small and there are other larger screen devices out there, although that does make them less portable. And the D-pad is probably a bit weak for fighting game aficionados. But overall, really impressed with this thing, much more than I expected actually. The screen is so good that it's really hard to do it justice on video. This will be getting a ton of use for Game Gear and Neo Geo Pocket in my house over Christmas. Thanks again to Mechdiy for sending this over for review. Again, a link below to their site where you can order yourself one. Thanks for watching.